I've been having a lot of fun playing Black Desert Online lately. Actually, I was just playing it for several hours earlier this evening, grinding mobs and walking on the treadmill at the same time and listening to various YouTube videos. And it's just, all things considered, it's a pretty amazing open world, and it's right up my alley of being a place where you can just run around and explore and get lost in the environment. But I've also been souring a little bit on Elder Scrolls Online, which is a game that I've loved in many ways for now years. And Tamriel just feels like a special kind of a place. It's a world that has been curated for 3 decades. Skyrim, of course, is the legacy anchor of the franchise, and yesterday I spent time modding Skyrim. And I know I've been critical of modding in the past, and the reason I've been critical of modding in the past is because in my experience with modding, it is amazing, but it can lead you to a rabbit hole where you spend more time focusing on trying to get your mods right and worrying about customizing your experience instead of just enjoying the experience at face value. But with a game like Skyrim, there's so much you can do with mods to change the way the game plays and looks. I just couldn't help thinking, I want to try this AI companion interface mod that is new. It's a rather complicated mod to install, but thankfully there's pretty detailed step-by-step instructions, and it did take me a little while to get it working, but it's pretty incredible. And I realized this is the beginning of something incredible that's going to be new in the gaming space. Being able to walk up to any NPC and truly speak to them and have a conversational experience. For example, in Skyrim, I was playing around with it, and I asked Lydia, my companion, where's the nearest Starbucks? And she says something to the effect of, "You're being ridiculous. This is a fantasy world. There is no fancy coffee shop here. We need to instead focus on the task at hand." And then she reminds me of the actual quest in the game that I need to be doing. So there's this sort of a self-aware NPC that's there to be a tutorial in the game and also to just add a certain sense of randomness to where you don't know what's going to happen. You don't know what the conversation is going to be about if you start talking to the AI. And that's really incredible. And that's just a indie mod doing this. But imagine what it'll be like when the technology gets a little bit more advanced and it gets implemented by a major studio. Just pretty crazy. But I'm kind of getting off point. What I was really bringing up is the fact that I was modding Skyrim, spent some time, an afternoon, getting it set up, and then continued a save that I've started in that game and really enjoyed it. But then I started to think about how I was reading lore books in Skyrim, and it's talking about different cities like Camlorn and Daggerfall. And then I was thinking about how that feels so much more meaningful because in Elder Scrolls Online, I know those places. I've spent many hours in those places in Elder Scrolls Online. And that's just so special to be able to have a sense of the entirety of what makes the Elder Scrolls universe a real place. The expansiveness of the entire continent at your fingertips just to be able to explore it. Now, do I think that the combat is pretty brain dead in Elder Scrolls Online? Yes. Are there things about the game's design premise that frustrate me sometimes? Yes, because I think that Elder Scrolls Online doesn't really live up to what the fans would have expected of an Elder Scrolls 6. It's just not the same kind of a game. In some ways, it's more broad in scope, but it also feels in many ways more shallow. There's some things it does a lot better, like being able to customize a house, but then there's also a lot of things it just feels like it doesn't do very well. Like a great example, when you go to Skyrim in Elder Scrolls Online, you try to fight a troll, and killing the troll is easy, like fighting a mud crab. It's just zero effort whatsoever to defeat this big troll. But try killing the same troll in Skyrim, and you might get launched into space in this epic, ridiculous way and one shot killed. And that's just an easy example of how Skyrim feels like a totally different kind of a game than Elder Scrolls Online. But to go back to my point of what I enjoy the most, it's the world. It's being able to be part of a place, an environment that's beautiful, that's fun to be part of. And that's what Elder Scrolls Online does such a good job at. Giving you the opportunity to just immerse yourself in an absolutely beautiful world where the entire map is filled with cities and places that you can look around and explore at your leisure. That is what I like more than anything else about Elder Scrolls Online. Now, one thing I don't like about the game is the fact that it seems to be trying to go woke lately. And that actually has made me want to cancel my ESO Plus subscription and just walk away from the game. And to talk about that a little bit, I thought it was fascinating how the developer recently addressed concerns about the non-binary companion that was released in Update 44 by saying that Tamriel has always been an inclusive place, and it's always had gay, lesbian, and trans characters represented in the world. But people just haven't really taken notice of it or been offended because the company has never shouted it from the rooftops or shoved it in people's faces. It was just naturally and organically there. And he said this in an effort to defend what the company had done recently by releasing the non-binary companion, which is crazy because if you think about it, that's exactly what they did when they released the new companion. They chose to shout it from the rooftops and shove it in everyone's face in a way that didn't feel organic at all. Now, the truth of the matter is, if I find a gay character somewhere in a game world, that doesn't bother me any more than it would bother me if I encountered a gay person in real life. What bothers me is when it becomes very clear that developers are pushing something. They're trying to shoehorn an agenda into a game instead of designing a good game. I don't expect that I need to appreciate everything about a game in order to appreciate the greater whole. And I like to see inclusion and diversity as long as it feels like it's coming from an organic place and it's not forced. What I don't like, and I think a lot of people agree with me on, is the woke business of trying to put the agenda first and not really worrying about quality as much as trying to check a box. That's what we don't like. But let's talk about it a little bit more. The reality is, you can love something and you cannot love everything about it. And I think that's an important thing to talk about, because it's so easy to get frustrated by something. Frustrated by something which maybe is a valid point, but it's also not necessarily a reason to say, I'm going to punish myself by not interacting with a product that I truly love, just because they've done something which I don't agree with. Now, am I a big fan of the non-binary companion? No, I really am not. But does that mean that I can't enjoy the game? That I can't explore the open world? Just because that part of the game is great? And I would say, no. It's okay to just let it be what it is. And another point that I wanted to make is that as much as I think that all of the woke people are obnoxious and need to be taken down a few notches, balance is a very important thing in life. And part of that balance is understanding that we do want a world that includes things that we don't necessarily think are cool, that includes things that don't necessarily align with our individual worldviews. That's one of the big things that I oppose about activist liberalism. The idea that we want to force inclusion so hard that we actually wind up excluding anyone that doesn't agree. But we also run the risk on the conservative side of going so far in an effort to defend tradition, defend our way of life, that we become hostile to anyone who's different than us. It goes both ways. The truth is, you can have an activist problem on the right or on the left. Either way, it isn't just a thing that afflicts the liberals. So now I want to shift gears just a little bit, and let's talk about the political situation in our country right now, just because it seems like it actually ties in just a little bit. And, you know, the pendulum swings back and forth. We talk about what is the position of politics in America. The reality is we are swinging from left to right. We're going from a time of liberalism being the in vogue thing to people kind of waking up to that and realizing we need to go back to center. We need to counteract the activist liberalism with something that's a little bit more based. And I think that that's very good. And that's going to continue to be a trend that pays off and yields dividends for probably years to come. It should. But there's going to be a time when the pendulum swings too far to the right, when it's going to become necessary for us to also, once again, say we don't need an activist right any more than we need an activist left. And I think there's going to be a time when I'm probably making a case for why I'm voting Democratic and opposing the right. A good example of this would be that there was a time, not that long ago, when there were conservative Christians saying that you shouldn't be able to play a video game because it didn't align with their prudish religious views. That was the thing. People were saying that if you played a game like Skyrim and ran around killing spiders in the woods in the game, you're going to wind up shooting up a school or something. Like that was the kind of conversations. Or if you were playing a game where you went into a underground lair and encountered a creepy monster, you are going to then proceed in real life to engage in a blood pact to sell your soul to Satan. That's what the Christians were doing back in the mid 2000s, I would say. And it was all over the news that we should be banning video games and things, right? So we've seen plenty of evidence that too far and the right can be just as big of a menace as the left when they want to be militant and force their agenda down the throats of everyone and stifle art and stifle innovation because everything has to align with their agenda. See, it goes both ways. But we all share a common bond. We all have something that unites us. You know, isn't it crazy? Depending on how old you are, I think probably most of us are somewhere in the age group of being young to middle-aged. But no matter what age we are living in this time where we get to see the dawn of so many incredible technologies. We see gaming evolve from something extremely primitive to something that's photorealistic. We get to see the beginning of the AI revolution. We get to see every year new innovations in the space that are going to transform people's lives for years to come. And isn't that amazing? Shouldn't we celebrate that? Shouldn't we be proud of that? You know, I think it's just important to keep things in perspective. Because being too cynical can be a path to losing sight of the bigger picture. Losing sight of the fact that, yes, there's things that we can argue about at election time. Yes, there's the risk of going in the wrong direction as a society. Yes, there's a risk of going too far. There's a lot of risks out there. Things that we can talk about, things that we can argue about. I'm all about mocking the woke DEI stuff being shoehorned into games. I'm all about opposing corporate initiatives that are always trying to push the diversity, equity, and inclusion at the expense of merit. There's a lot of things that we have and will talk about, which I think are valid and should be discussed and should be criticized. But as a greater whole, we live in a time of pragmatic liberalism, more so than any other time in human history. And we should take a moment to celebrate that. And also to understand that it's something we need to defend. The truth of the matter is, no matter what side of the fence you're on politically, in Western countries, we have a lot of freedom that people don't have in some parts of the world. Imagine living in the Middle East in a religious theocracy where your sexual orientation or your religion or your gender could determine whether you're allowed to live or die, whether you're allowed to have freedom, whether you're allowed to drive a car, or whether you're allowed to have a voice of any kind. You see, when we put things like that into perspective, it becomes clear that a lot of what we argue about, fight about, really is just sort of petty fighting over semantics. Yes, I do think it matters, but I also think it's important to keep things based enough to realize that we're all part of the same team. Now, there are a couple things I wanted to talk about One of them is the gender gap. I was watching a video talking about how right now there's a bigger gender gap than there probably ever has been when it comes to how people will vote in political elections, things like that. There was an infographic showing that 16% or 18% of guys would support Donald Trump. Well, 18% more guys would support Donald Trump. It was like an 18-point lead for Trump on the male side. And on the female side, it was a 16-point leaning toward Kamala Harris. The point being that you have this enormous gap where guys are increasingly conservative and women are increasingly liberal. And it's getting to the point where it almost feels like men sort of hate women and women hate men. And it's a vicious cycle because they're saying, well, you want to go to your silo, then go to your silo and leave me out of it. And both sides maybe have some valid points. But whenever you start to strengthen the attitude that we don't need each other and one side should win at the expense of the other, we're missing the fact that it really is more of a yin and a yang kind of a thing. It's a situation where we do need each other. We need men and we need women. We need roles that are different. We need leaders and we need people who serve. We need people who are interested in philosophy and art. And we need those offset by people who are going to be admirals and generals and politicians. We need people who create and invent, and we need people who market the creation and invention of others. We need free spirits, and we need people who want to devote their lives to public service. We need all of those different kinds of people. We even need, whether we like to admit it or not, we need good and evil, because you can't have good and light if you don't have darkness to contrast it. So the key to finding a sort of an amity there between all things is to understand that the goal is not for one side to win all the time. The goal is to fight for balance. And I love the Dungeons and Dragons allegory of alignments. And in the middle of it is true neutral. Now, true neutral could be not caring at all about anything, but more specifically, generally, what true neutral actually is the passion for balance. That you will always fight for balance. Not that one side wins all the time, but you will fight to make sure that all sides win equally. Because you never want to hunt the last buffalo. You never want to kill the defenseless mockingbird. You always want to find a way to make sure that all voices have an opportunity to sustain themselves and continue to find a place of expression. That's important. I was watching a video of a concert for the anniversary of Skyrim. It's on YouTube. The musical score of Skyrim being played by an orchestra, and a lot of people responded to that video, posting how much they loved it. And one of the posts was from someone who said, they said something to the effect of, I started playing this game 4 years ago in my 70s, and it became a sanctuary for me. The music has meant a lot, and the world has been a place where I could escape and find comfort. And hundreds of people chimed in to echo similar sentiments. I thought that was beautiful. And it's also a great example of why it's so important for us as gamers, as people who are interested in imaginative things, to be there for each other, to support each other, And yes, we can chide one another. We can be frustrated by things going on in the industry. We can have a sense of ridicule for things that we don't like or maybe don't agree with. But we should remember that there's people of all types playing games. And I think we really are a special breed of people. People who have gotten something of solace and comfort out of being able to escape into another world. And that's something that shouldn't be cast away. It's something that should be cherished, something that should be strengthened. And so no matter how much there seems to be some differences and disagreements, we should remember we live in one of the greatest times in history, the best time to be a gamer, the best time to be a part of society, the best time to be able to have an armchair view of incredible events in human history. So let's not lose sight of that. Let's not be bitter toward one another or inclined to be too frustrated about our differences. Life is good, and we should always ask ourselves, what inspires us? What gives us a sense of hope? What gives us a sense of joy? And what instills a sense of wonder? And those are the things we should invest our time into. When I look at political things and all the stuff going on in the campaign, I think about how one of the biggest red flags is when people are always talking about how much they hate someone else. Instead of being passionate about something that they love, they're spending more time defining themselves by what they're against. Always look at life through the lens of what you stand for, not what you stand against. And that doesn't mean that you never take a stand for anything in opposition. It's just the best form of opposing something is to stand for something. It's steel against steel. Not to want to burn down everything that doesn't align with your interests, but rather to build up the things which are meaningful and special to you. As always, try to be entertained by all of the different things that interest you in the world, but have a loose enough handle on them to enjoy life and find loveliness in the journey that you have. If I've learned anything in my life, it's probably two lessons. One of them is don't sell yourself to other people. Don't let debt or leverage or someone having dirt on you put you in a spot where you have to compromise your values. But the other thing is understand that time is more valuable than money in the end. And it's extremely important that you make a point to love every day that you have. Because if you're living your life with the intention that you're going to have a better time if things go your way down the road, that's a terrible disservice to you and everyone else in your life. Celebrate your life, and even if you point out, pick fun at, and fight the mobs, the monsters, the slings and arrows that are all around you, don't become a cynical person. We've all seen them. People who are old and frustrated and brittle, and all they have to say is something negative. Don't be that person. Have an opinion, but also have faith that we have no reason not to believe that we're living in the best and most blessed time in our history. So, as always, good luck on your adventure. Till next time, thanks so much for watching.